of the Leawood Chamber of Commerce's Legislative Affairs Task Force. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Johnson County Public Policy Council's Candidate Forum for the Kansas Senate District 11. Today's forum is co-hosted by the Overland Park Chamber. Joining me are Joy Koesten, the Democratic candidate, and Kellie Warren, the Republican candidate. The Johnson County Public Policy Council is comprised of the 10 chambers of commerce serving Johnson County. They developed today's questions focusing on business and community issues. We'll start with a brief opening statement for up to 2 minutes for each candidate, followed by our Q&A. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Kevin Jeffries from the Leawood Chamber is serving as our timekeeper and will hold up a 1-minute sign, 30 seconds, and when it's time to stop. At the conclusion of the forum, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
Sorry, Molly. I might qualify. It's actually, my script was wrong. It's 1.5 minutes for the responses.
Thank you.
I apologize.
Because of the time constraints of the format, we won't have questions from the audience. We'll alternate which candidate goes first, and before we went live, we conducted a coin toss to see who would start. So we'll ask Rep. Kellie Warren to start with her opening statement.
Well, thank you, Molly, and thank you to the task force and the council. I am Representative Kellie Warren, and I'm glad to be here with you today. I grew up here in Overland Park in Johnson County and graduated from Shawnee Mission South. My husband did too. Then I went to Cornell University and came back to Kansas to KU Law School. So when my husband and I, when it came time to raise our family, we knew this is right where we wanted to be. So we're raising our 4 kids here in Blue Valley Schools, which we love, we're very proud of. I serve on the PTO at the high school and on the elementary school. And I'm also a lawyer here, so I'm used to being a trusted problem solver. It's what I do for a living. People come to me to solve real world problems for them. So when my neighbors, my community started noticing that we weren't getting solutions out of Topeka, we were getting politics, they asked me to run for office and represent them and be their voice in Topeka. So I ran for office and I was proud to be elected in 2018 to the House of Representatives. And there I've been all about solutions, not politics. I helped resolve the school funding crisis that had been going on for decades, got that resolved within the first few weeks of being in office, and also worked on a transportation plan, which we passed and which will fund the future for our community. So I'm straightforward, I work hard, I'm one of you, we play soccer games, I watch my kids play softball, I coach softball for my kids. I've also been a volleyball coach when no one was coaching the team and someone needed to step up. So that's what I'll do for you in Topeka, and I want to work hard and look forward to the conversation today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Now let's turn to Joy Koesten for her opening statement.
Thank you, Molly. And I'd like to thank all of the chambers for hosting this forum. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm even more grateful that my opponent decided to show up. I decided to run for office again for one simple reason: to keep Kansas moving forward. My husband and I moved to Kansas in 1978 for a job, but we stayed all of these years for the great schools and the remarkable opportunities that this community afforded us for professional growth. We raised our daughters in the Shawnee Mission School District and advanced our careers as they grew up. In 1996, we founded a financial planning firm that now employs 16 professionals. In 1998, I returned to school to earn my graduate degrees. And this past March, I retired from a 20-year career in higher education. I've been incredibly honored to serve in the faculty of Johnson County Community College, Washburn University, and all 3 campuses of the University of Kansas. In 2016, I was recruited by moderate Republicans to run for the Kansas House, specifically to join a bipartisan coalition to end the Brownback tax experiment so we could fund our schools, rebuild our mental health system, and stop robbing KDOT just to pay the bill. Now, yes, I'm a proud Democrat running in Senate 11, because we've worked too hard to restore our state and we can't go back. The citizens in Senate 11 deserve a determined vocal leader who's willing to fight for the things that we want and need: access to affordable health care and the right to make our own healthcare decisions, a modern workable tax system that works for all of us, not just some of us, continued investment in education at all levels, property tax and sales tax relief, and yes, sensible gun laws. In short, we want to be able to raise our families in safe, healthy communities with opportunities for economic stability and prosperity for all. I hope by the end of this forum, I will have earned your vote.
Thank you, Joy. And Joy, we'll start with you for the Q&A. For the first question, as a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
Well, the top 3 policy issues facing us today are very simple. COVID recovery, keeping our schools open while protecting students and teachers and essential staff, and restoring our economy. Clearly, these priorities are situated within a global pandemic, so until we mitigate the effects of this virus, many other issues will have to take a back seat. At some point, we have to address things like Medicaid expansion and improving access to mental health treatment, tax reform, and infrastructure, just to name a few. But the biggest issue in the coming year will certainly be rebuilding our economy. As our local chambers know, 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. I grew up in a small family business, and for 25 years, we have owned a small business. I know firsthand the challenges that businesses face, especially in hard times. When I served in the Kansas House, I earned an A+ voting record with our local chambers of commerce, while my opponent has only been able to earn a C-. But she did earn an A+ voting record with the Koch-funded Kansas Chamber. What's the difference? Our local chambers support small businesses that drive our local economy, while the Kansas Chamber does the bidding of large corporations. Today, 1 in 4 small businesses are at risk of closing permanently due to COVID. But when small businesses asked for a $2,000 tax credit during the early days of the pandemic, my opponent said no. Instead, she voted for a $100 million tax giveaway to big business. So no wonder the Koch family spent more than $53,000 to push her Senate bid in the primary and to push another moderate out of public service. That $2,000 tax credit turned out to be a big deal. We need both kinds of businesses on our communities. But I'll be fighting for small businesses too, and I have the track record to prove it.
Thank you, Joy. And Kellie, you're next. As a candidate, what are your top 3 policy issues?
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'm all about solutions, not politics, not political games, not political opportunism, which some in politics have made it their whole career to be a political opportunist. That's not me. I'll tell you what I do. I look forward to rebuilding our economics and our economy safely. In the House, I worked on a bipartisan bill, a COVID-19 response bill that helped get emergency funding for our schools when they needed it, that extended unemployment benefits for Kansans who found themselves out of jobs, and some nursing home requirements that they be inspected by the state during this pandemic. I'm also working on holding the line on taxes. I hear from my opponent and her party that they want to raise taxes to resolve the budget issues that are going to be facing Kansas in January. This is no time to raise taxes. People are hurting, businesses are hurting. My opponent misspeaks when she says I don't support small businesses. I'm endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business. I convened by Zoom video conference immediately when the stay-at-home order started. Local restaurants and bars, nail and hair salons, and local retailers who were put out of being in business right away. We all worked together week after week, and we came up and we brainstormed and learned how are we going to get this reopened again, how we are going to keep customers and employees safe. And I was proud to do that. I got business liability protection in place when we were back in special session. We have got to lower healthcare costs as well. I'm proud to have accomplished that in the House by preparing and presenting and passing into law healthcare options that my opponent didn't get any of that done, quite frankly, when she was a legislator.
Thank you both. Next, and Rep. Warren, we'll start with you. How would you propose to balance the state budget, and what specific budget cuts would you support, and what revenue enhancements would you consider, if any?
Well, we are going to have a budget issue when we go back in January. I think that government money must be spent wisely. We've got to protect the taxpayer, their wallets, their pocketbooks. They work hard for the tax dollars, and we don't deserve to use them if they're not used wisely and efficiently. My opponent actually raised taxes when she was in the House. She raised taxes $1.2 billion on the working poor and the middle class. With one vote, she did that. And it went retroactively too. I don't think that's fair. And it didn't solve any problems, quite frankly. I'm all about finding solutions. We've got to start with $0 budgeting. That means just like when my family has a smaller budget, we've got to prioritize. We've got to keep our schools well funded, and we've got to keep government services in place for those who need them. But we cannot raise taxes. That's not a solution. And we've got to justify every dollar that every department of government spends. We start with $0 and you justify every dollar. You don't start with, well, how much more of an increase do you get over last year? We don't have the luxury to do that. Belts need to be tightened, just like in my family. Like I said, we've got 4 kids, and when our budget is smaller, we've got to prioritize and work within our budget. That's what government should do. That's how government works best for its citizens.
Okay, Joy, you're next. How would you propose to balance the state budget, and what specific budget cuts would you support, and what revenue enhancements would you consider, if any?
You know, COVID-19 has changed everything, and certainly the state budget will need to be altered to address the devastating shortfalls. Revenues to the state will take a huge hit following the financial devastation of the pandemic, and we need to be prepared to manage the needs of our citizens with a depleted revenue stream while balancing the budget. Certainly, we hope that the states will receive much needed help from federal government, but we must work toward bipartisan consensus to balance the budget in a smart way that protects critical services and core investments for the future of Kansas. Our biggest challenge will be rebuilding the economy, but closely tied to that will be ensuring every Kansan has access to affordable health care, including mental health care, funding our public schools. So funding for healthcare and education must continue to be a priority for our state, even in trying times. But make no mistake, the upcoming budget crisis will be painful for all Kansans. But my question is this: why does my opponent want only the poor and middle-class Kansans to feel the pain instead of the wealthy? Why should a teacher have to justify every penny she spends in the classroom, but large corporations like Koch Industries doesn't have to justify every tax break she's going to give them? There's only one way to move the state forward, and that's to build a coalition of elected leaders who are willing to work together and adjust budgetary priorities with a keen eye towards the future rather than arbitrary cuts across the board. As senator, I'll fight to cultivate new revenue streams and ensure that agencies have the necessary revenues to serve Kansans as we recover. I'll also fight to maintain a rainy day fund for emergencies and support responsible budgeting to protect future generations from deficits.
Thank you. The next question will start with Joy. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
It's a great question, Molly. Growing a strong economy starts with foundational investments: good schools, good roads and bridges, safe communities, short commute times. You know, the simple stuff that supports a strong middle class and keeps us all right here. Infrastructure is the key to Kansas economic growth, and we have a moral obligation to ensure that the infrastructure we share functions well, that roads and bridges transport people and goods safely, access to clean water and sanitary sewer systems, safe parks, a stable energy grid, and reliable broadband. All of these investments will pay off with good jobs as long as we're prepared to invest in our people too. So as an educator and a business owner, I know that none of these businesses can survive without a ready workforce. Our community demands world-class public education with forward-thinking curriculum, small class sizes, and excellent teachers who prepare students for a competitive, ever-changing domestic and global economy. This requires adequate investments in education at all levels, from early childhood education through higher education, career and technical education, job training, and apprentice programs. Learning to access new information and honing new skills is the only way we can train workers to compete in an ever-evolving workforce. As senator, I'll support legislation that invests in a world-class public education system at all levels, invest in teachers who are experts in their field, foster collaboration with business partners and civic leaders for real-world training that prepares all Kansans for good-paying jobs.
And Rep. Warren, we'll go with you next. What would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
Molly, this is a question that's near and dear to my heart, being the mother of 4 children right here in our Blue Valley schools. I want Kansas to be a competitive place where businesses can compete and do well here. That starts with the tax environment we create for businesses to come. We need to have stable economic planning here as well. Our Blue Valley schools and Shawnee Mission schools are fabulous. That's why my 4 kids are enrolled in them. And in fact, my oldest has graduated from Blue Valley High already. So she's a proud product of the public schools, as am I. I want to keep Kansas a good place where they can stay just like I did, just like my parents still live here, about 10 minutes away, and we can grow the economy here. I think that means keeping our schools strong. I got that done in the legislature. My opponent in 2 years never did. So again, I'm all about solutions, not playing politics. I got a 10-year transportation plan done. My opponent in 2 years never did. So again, we need to keep roads strong, and that will bring jobs, that transportation plan as well. So when you're looking for solutions, look to me to be your state senator. When you're looking for politics, look somewhere else if you're looking for political games, because that's not me. I work across party lines, got some things done for our community. The broadband, it's important that we did that. We passed a bill that would expand access to broadband across the state. Thank goodness we did, especially with the stay-at-home orders. It's been really important, I know, to me and my family and others, when you've got to shop online for groceries even. So I want to bring that to Kansas. I got that done. My opponent did not. So again, if you're looking to solutions, look to me to be your state senator.
The next question will deal with education, and Rep. Warren, you'll answer first. What are your views on K-12 public education funding in Kansas?
Well, I think you've heard me talk about that a lot already. I'm a proud mom of 4 Blue Valley school kids, and I love that our schools are great. I talk with my neighbors about it all the time. And again, I'm really proud as a legislator and as a mom to have resolved the decades-long school funding crisis. My opponent says she went to Topeka to get it solved, but you know what? She never did. I did in my first 2 weeks there, and we got it done with bipartisan support, and the Supreme Court signed off on it. So I want to look now, concentrate on a good world-class curriculum, make sure the kids are learning what they need to learn to be competitive in this global market, this global economy. I want to make sure our teachers are well looked after. In fact, in that response bill that we did in June in special session when I was in the legislature, we made sure that our teachers got paid per their contract, even though schools had to close the last few weeks of school in the spring. So we need to keep them fully funded and make sure those dollars are used wisely. I saw a report that administration salary increased 12% for some administrators, 30% for others. And I hear from neighbors and friends and other school parents that they don't think that's right. They don't think that's fair. They want those dollars to go to the classroom and to the teachers. And so do I. That's where my kids are, for goodness sake. So let's keep our schools strong, and so we can have a good, strong state. We don't have mountains in Kansas. We don't have beaches and oceans, but we have good schools. That's why people move here. That's why good families and new families come here. And that's why the grandparents want to keep them good as well. So let's keep our schools strong.
Thank you. And Joy, you're next. What are your views on K-12 public education funding in Kansas?
You know, Molly, one of the biggest reasons I ran for office in 2016 was to ensure that our public schools were adequately and equitably funded. I had watched for years as Sam Brownback and his allies cut educational funding across the board. It is laughable that my opponent, who campaigned for Brownbackers Jeff Melcher and Jerry Lunn in 2016, says that she alone worked to end the years of lawsuits and threats of school closures by passing a sound funding plan. With all due respect, I was in the room where it happened. I was part of the bipartisan coalition who worked to end the Brownback tax experiment and fund our schools. We did the hard work long before Kellie Warren arrived. In fact, Kellie was recruited to run against me in 2018 because she agreed to do exactly the opposite. She just hasn't had the opportunity yet, but she will if she gets 4 years in the Senate. My opponent also thinks we can put education funding behind us. To think that education funding is ever behind us demonstrates a lack of forethought that will put our schools in jeopardy again. We know adequate funding for our schools is persistent and essentially challenged in our state. Our schools are bombarded with mandates and changing demands ever more frequently. Our teachers and administrators are expected to do more with less every year. Over the 2 years that I served in the Kansas House, I visited our schools over 30 times, talking to principals and teachers about their needs and concerns. This current health crisis has made it abundantly clear that change can happen abruptly, but educators continue to prepare students of all ages for jobs that don't exist, to use technologies that haven't been invented, to solve problems that will emerge without warning. I am not in favor of, nor would I support, a constitutional amendment removing the obligation to fund K-12 public education, and I oppose using tax dollars to fund private education. My opponent favors those things. That said,
Thank you. And the next question for Joy to answer first. What types of economic development policies will you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
You know, Molly, after more than a decade of neglect, we finally have a functioning Commerce Department and a visionary leader in the governor's office who has made all the difference for the future of Kansas. I'm especially excited about the new Urban Outfitters Distribution Center located in Wyandotte County, and the Silver Shovel project that was recently announced. These projects alone will bring billions of dollars in capital investments and tens of thousands of jobs in Kansas. My opponent argues that if we want to attract new business to Kansas, we have to cut corporate tax rates because businesses want consistency on taxes. But businesses don't just look at taxes. They look at the schools, they look at the infrastructure and the workforce. To be frank, any business who's not willing to pay their fair share to help fund these things in our community should not be courted. Clearly, education and training are the foundation of a robust business climate. So first and foremost is education funding is critical to our state. As I mentioned before, the work being done by Secretary Tolan and the Department of Commerce is long overdue. Kansas has much to offer companies looking to invest and expand opportunities in logistics, distribution, agriculture, technology, sustainable and renewable energy, and much more. As Senator, I'll work with the Commerce Department and business leaders to ensure we can promote the benefits of moving businesses to Kansas.
Thank you, Joy. And Rep. Warren, what types of economic development policies will you support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas?
I want to listen to our businesses. I want to listen to our businesses leaders, big and small. I do have a 100% rating from the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce, and I am endorsed by many Kansas businesses and many Kansas business organizations. So let's talk about what they need. Let's listen to them. I hear from companies that they don't have the machinists trained to be able to do what they need to do. So they're having trouble finding new employees. So let's work on our trade schools. Let's work on our packages where we can get kids into colleges who want to go there. We've got to have a good, robust curriculum as well. And I think that with businesses listening to what their needs are, they're the ones who are going to be employing folks, and the business opportunities will come. If we give a level playing field to all who want to participate here, they know, businesses will know they can find a home here and they can keep Kansas their home. That's what we need, not always the tax policies going back and forth, because business leaders know that chaos is not good for their business. They need stability, they need planning. So anything that can bring stability and planning to our businesses, that's what I would be in favor of.
Thank you. The next question. What are your views on state tax policy, being as specific as you can? And we'll start with Kellie.
Thank you. I think we've talked a lot about tax policy. You know, as I knock doors and listen to folks at their doorsteps, they're telling me Kansas, they realize, is the 9th highest taxing state in the country. We've got high income tax on the working class, the middle class, the wealthy even, and businesses too. Property taxes, again, are high as well. Seniors in our communities are being taxed right out of their homes. I was just talking to a woman today who actually had to sell her house because she couldn't afford the property taxes. She could pay her mortgage, but not the property taxes. Utility rates are high. I worked on that on the Energy, Utility, and Telecommunication Committee and passed a study to determine why Kansas has a 25% higher utility rate, which is not good for businesses and it's not good for families. So I want to work on that as well. And again, I got that done, a utility rate study, another solution that I found and got results for you, Kansans. So let's work on those things that can bring sensible tax policy. Yes, we have to pay for good roads and good schools, but your tax dollars, your wallet is not an ATM machine for Kansas. It's just not. We have to be wise and look at what we can do to hold the line on taxes for everybody, because we all want to live here. We all want Kansas to be safe and to prosper. I fully funded law enforcement as well. So we need our communities to be safe and thriving. That's why we live here, is because we have safe, thriving communities with good opportunities for jobs and schools. So let's keep it that way.
Enjoy your turn now. What are your views on state tax policy, being as specific as you can?
Well, as I noted before, I was part of the bipartisan coalition that voted to end the devastating Brownback tax experiment and supported policies that allowed us to take the first steps toward restoring our state. From that tax experiment, we hopefully learned a few basic ideas: that tax policy should be simple, transparent, neutral, and stable. My opponent, on the other hand, thinks that cutting corporate taxes is the best way to drive economic development. If that were the case, Sam Brownback would have been the greatest job creator in the history of our state. He was one of the worst, and she wants to go back to his disastrous plan, so no thanks. Because of the tax policies of the Brownback administration, our cities and counties have had to bear the burden of raising taxes elsewhere. Property taxes and sales taxes have gone through the roof because of our unwillingness to codify a consistent, fair tax structure that funds basic services for all Kansans. Instead, people like my opponent continue to vote for massive tax breaks for corporations, costing the rest of us millions of dollars. Voting against reducing food sales tax to help all Kansans. In light of the current health crisis, we're going to have to be willing to explore all the ideas that can come forward to ensure that we have the necessary resources to invest in our state. In recent years, we've begun to consider new lines of revenue, and I'm open to hearing the pros and cons of all tax reform ideas as we move forward to build our state.
Thank you both. The next question: what are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion? And we'll start with Joy.
Thanks, Molly. This is a particular important issue to me. The COVID crisis has certainly highlighted what we've known for years. Access to affordable health care is critical to the well-being of every Kansan. Medicaid expansion would strengthen our ability to manage this public health crisis and save lives. So far, we've handed over more than $4 billion to other states that have expanded Medicaid while watching our rural hospitals close, and Kansans go without access to health care. When I served in the Kansas House, we got very close to passing Medicaid expansion, only to have it vetoed by Governor Brownback. I'll continue to fight for Medicaid expansion to provide access to health care to all Kansans while reducing the burden of uncompensated care for service providers. Our family knows firsthand that there is no health without mental health. So strengthening and integrating our mental health system into our healthcare system is critical to ensure the whole health of every Kansan. Medicaid expansion would free up critical dollars and help us expand mental health and addiction services across the state. My opponent wants the status quo and supports initiatives like the Farm Bureau Plan, which excludes many pre-existing conditions. In fact, the Farm Bureau Plan isn't even subject to consumer complaint assistance at the Kansas Insurance Department because it's not insurance. Medicaid expansion has worked in every state it's been approved, even the conservative ones, and not one state has rescinded it. My opponent has voted repeatedly to send your tax dollars to 38 states in the District of Columbia instead of keeping your federal tax dollars here. As senator, I'll fight for Medicaid expansion because Kansans deserve access to care and service providers deserve to be paid.
Thank you, Joy. And Kellie, you're next. What are your views on healthcare policy and Medicaid expansion?
Well, we want to see all Kansans with reasonable, affordable access to health care. I want to improve and expand access to health care in Kansas. I want to improve and amend Medicaid for those who are already eligible for it. The waiting list for those benefits for those who are already eligible for Medicaid is way too long. Again, I have friends, I've knocked on the doors of some folks around the community who tell me the line is so long to wait for benefits, it's not even worth it. That is unacceptable. So before we can expand the population to able-bodied adults and the population who Medicaid was never intended for, it was intended for seniors, for the disabled, pregnant women, and those who can't work. Before we expand the population to others who are able-bodied, we need to take care of those most needy Kansans first. And we can do that by improving access to affordable health care. My opponent talks about other states who have expanded Medicaid expansion. They haven't rescinded it. They must like it. That's because you can't rescind it. So I want to look for more flexible, more reasonable, more nimble solutions that fit Kansas and fit Kansans. And we can do that. One of the things is the Farm Bureau health plans. It became law under Governor Kellie. And what did my opponent get done for healthcare solutions for Kansans during her tenure in legislature? Nothing. So again, if you want a senator who produces results and solutions and doesn't play politics, vote for me and I'll be your senator who gets you solutions.
Thank you. And then this will be our last question before closing statements. We'll start with Kellie. What do you believe most distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
Thank you. I think you've heard it during this conversation. I'm all about solutions, not politics. You've heard my opponent accuse me of certain things that are too numerous to address because they're just not true. So I am one who's going to work hard for you. I'm part of this community. I've been part of this community nearly my whole life. I know this community. I'm part of it. I go to the schools because my kids are in them. I don't just visit them because I'm an elected representative, but I'm in there for first and last days of school, for classroom parties, for birthday parties, for lunches. I go to them when my kids get sick and the nurse has called for me to bring them home. I'm a solution finder. I get the job done. I'm a trusted problem solver. I work towards the middle. That's what I do as an attorney. People come to me with their real problems and we work this side. I have to know the facts on this side and that side too. I have to know your positions and we work towards the middle. 99.something% of my cases settle. And that's because we reach a fair resolution. Get the job done and move on. That's what people expect when we're sent to the Capitol to work for you. You obviously are the best representative of you, but we can't all go to Topeka. So you need to send someone like me who can be trusted. I'm not a flip-flopper. I'm not a lifelong Democrat, then run for office as a Republican and then lose an election and flip back to Democrat. That's not me. You know where I stand on the issues. And I will stand for you. I will fight for you because you are my priority.
Thank you. And then Joy, what do you believe distinguishes you from your opponent most in this race?
So this election offers you a clear choice between two very different candidates and very different visions of our future. I'm very transparent about my votes. My opponent is not. I show up for constituents to hear their concerns and different points of view. My opponent can't be bothered and isn't interested in anyone else's point of view. I value science and data, especially during a public health crisis. My opponent thinks that masks aren't important and thinks we should strive for herd immunity. I support sound public policy that benefits all Kansans. My opponent supports radical far-right ideology that only benefits a few Kansans. I vote in the best interest of my constituents, not along party lines, even if it means losing an election. My opponent has signed on to one of the most extreme party platforms in our history. One of the main reasons I left the Republican Party. I want strong, efficient government systems at all levels. My opponent would rather we have no government at all. I work across the aisle and share ownership of successes and failures. My opponent seems to solve every single problem on her own. This election offers us a clear choice at all levels. Do we want leaders who believe we have a moral obligation to one another, or people who want to divide us? Do we want true public servants who see the future filled with opportunities for everyone, or people who only want a few to succeed? I want the former, not the latter. I hope you do too. I am that candidate.
Thank you both. And we will wrap up today's forum with closing statements. Joy, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you to the chambers for hosting this forum. Leadership means a willingness to face problems with courage, truth, and resolve. It means a willingness to confront ideological opposition and calls for shared sacrifice, knowing that none of this is easy. For the first time in over 70 years, we're being asked to come together and to fight as one country, as an enemy, against an enemy that we can't even see. Our biggest sacrifice isn't to die on the shores of Normandy or suffer the cruelties of a concentration camp. We're being asked to wear a mask, socially distance, and wash our hands. I don't know anyone who doesn't want us to go back to normal, but COVID has changed everything, and we must come together for the greater good. I know we can beat COVID if we follow the science, understand the data, and listen to the experts, and if we come together. As I said at the beginning of this forum, the citizens of Senate 11 deserve a determined vocal leader who's willing to fight for the things we want and need: access to affordable health care and the right to make our own healthcare decisions, a modern, workable tax system that works for all of us, not just some of us, continued investment in education at all levels, property tax and sales tax relief, and yes, sensible gun laws. In short, we want to be able to raise our families in safe, healthy communities with opportunities for economic stability and prosperity for all. I hope that I have earned the privilege of your vote, and I look forward to serving you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. And now, Kellie, it's your turn for your closing statement.
Thank you, Molly. You've heard a lot of name calling from my opponent today. And I think that's one thing that distinguishes the two of us. That's not me. I work for solutions. I work together with others to get the job done. She's talked about radical. And so I will address the radical that she's talked about. My opponent has signed a pledge to defund the police.
That
is not going to keep our families safe. She has tweeted support for defunding the police. That is not going to keep our families and our neighborhoods and our communities safe and our businesses safe. She talks about brownback taxes and things like that. You know what's radical was her vote to raise taxes retroactively on you, Kansans of all income levels, $1.2 billion, the biggest income tax increase in history. And we're still paying the price of that. That was in 2017, and they've still gone up and up. She accuses me of cutting corporate tax rates. I haven't said anything about cutting tax rates. So you need to look specifically at my policies and what I'm going to work on, and listen to what is being said and how it's being delivered here. My opponent is a political opportunist. She always has been since her career started. She's been a lifelong Democrat. You can look at her registration. Then she ran as a Republican for the House district that I currently represent. People were frustrated that they weren't seeing transparency in their elected official because she ran as a Republican and then voted as a Democrat. Trusted officials is what we need. We see they can make very important direct decisions that affect our daily lives. Can our kids go to school? Can we go to church? Can I visit my father-in-law in the nursing home? Can I go to work? Can my business open? You have got to send trusted officials. How can we trust my opponent when first she's a lifelong Democrat, runs as a Republican, and is honestly, as soon as I defeated her, she came out as the Democrat she's always been. And since voters last rejected her, she's moved nothing but further to the left. That's too risky for Kansas, and it doesn't work for our families. So I am the stable, trusted position. You know where I stand.
Right.
So vote for me, and I don't interrupt when others are speaking either. So I will listen, and I will work with the other side. In fact, I'm already working with House representatives in the Senate district, already building that teamwork that we need. So if they're elected in the House, and me in the Senate, we will work together across the chamber to get policies enacted that you, my neighbors, our community really care about, that will really help you at your dinner table, at your work, at your business, to keep our community safe and thriving. So please vote for me, Kellie Warren, for Senate District 11. You can learn more about me at my website, www.kelliewarrenforsenate.com. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you both so much for participating and for your time. This concludes today's forum for the Kansas Senate District 11 featuring Joy Koesten and Kellie Warren. We'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and remind you that today's forum has been recorded and will be posted on the Johnson County Policy Council's website, votejoco.com. That's votejoco.com. Advanced voting by mail begins October 14th, and advanced voting in person begins shortly after. Election Day is on November 3rd. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.